Welcome to Church Tech Unmuted, the podcast where faith, faders, and function come together. I'm your host, Felix Aguirre, founder of Faith Tech Pros. Whether you're mixing front of house, managing live streams, or training volunteers, this show brings you real-world advice, tech tips, and stories to help you serve with clarity and confidence. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome to the very first episode of Church Tech Unmuted, the podcast where faith meets faders and production serves the mission. I'm your host, Felix Aguirre, founder of Faith Tech Pros, and I spent the last 20 years knee-deep in worship sound, live streams, audio installs, and last-minute tech emergencies that somehow always happens during the altar call. I started this podcast because I've seen a gap, not just in gear or tech knowledge, but in support. Churches are full of amazing volunteers, passionate worship teams, and dedicated leaders, but tech is often the bottleneck. Whether you're a seasoned tech director or the guy who was voluntold to run sound last weekend, which we've all been there, this show is for you. Today, we're starting with something foundational, the top 5 church tech mistakes and how to fix them. These aren't pulled from theory or textbooks. These are real-life frustrations I see every week and that I've experienced before in my time doing sound, real-life frustrations that friends of mine have experienced that do sound in their churches or professionally in other venues. And, I've also dug through forums, through Reddit, through church tech communities to find out what you guys are actually dealing with. And I want to talk about that. So let's grab a coffee, which, let's face it, if you're in tech, you have a coffee addiction, and let's dive in. So mistake number 1 that I've seen and that I've experienced is just straight up poor audio quality. Let's be honest, if the sound is bad, the worship experience suffers. The congregation is distracted. They are no longer focused on what's important, which is worshiping the Lord and listening to the message and receiving the word. The number one complaint across every forum that I looked at was basically the sound sucks. And that sucks. Our sound should not suck. We should try to do the best that we can because we are doing it for the Lord. We are not just putting up something that doesn't mean anything. This is important. This is service unto him, and we are trying to give him our best. Usually, from my experience and from what I've seen, the main culprit of people saying the sound sucks is, little things that they notice, such as feedback screeches. Sometimes during the worship, the vocals get lost under all the music and you can't really hear what they're singing. Or sometimes the pastor's mic is too quiet, or it even cuts out mid-sermon, and that's just not something that we want. And you know what's worse? Sometimes the tech team doesn't even know about some of these issues because there's no one walking the room. I know that in my experience, it's really good to have a dedicated tech member, whether it be your actual front of house guy or some sort of auxiliary or assistant to the front of house guy, to walk the room during the worship, to walk the room during the message, to make sure that it all sounds the same, that it all sounds clear and the message is going through. Usually with newer boards, with digital boards, the sound guy, front of house guy could hop on an iPad and walk the room and just see how it's sounding in different parts of the room. Because I know from my experience, especially working with odd shaped rooms, sometimes you have to place the speakers in funky places or point it weird in order to get the sound where you need it to go. And that causes the sound to not be even across the room. So it's good to have someone walking the room. Some of the things that you could do to help your sound situation, I think the most important thing is to start with proper gain staging. Digital boards is a little bit easier because you have meters that you could see the amount of volume coming in. But I think you need to start with proper gain staging. Don't just crank the gain and the faders until you hear something. No, because that causes feedback, that causes unwanted noise in the system, and that causes a lot of mud, a lot of stuff that you don't want. So proper gain staging would be the best way to go. I would recommend maybe doing a quick Google search or YouTube search on how to properly gain stage with the board that you have, because all boards are different and some boards have different settings or different ways that you're supposed to gain stage them in order to get the best sound that you can get. Another thing that's really important is learn how to EQ for clarity. cut muddy frequencies instead of boosting highs blindly. I recommend when you start EQing, I recommend start cutting first before boosting so you can find those frequencies. Something that I like to do also is I just kind of sweep. So I do a boost of a frequency and I sweep the entire span and I see what are the frequencies that I don't like or that are sounding bad, and I start cutting those. I cut before I boost. That way anything that I don't want in that mix is gone, and then I can start boosting and making clear what I want the mix to sound like. Another tip is to use compression. Always use compression on your vocals, on your speech mics. You want this to even out the dynamics. Sometimes we have vocalists that are very dynamic. They'll sing super soft during soft parts and then super loud during the, bigger parts. And, we've adjusted our fader up to compensate for them singing super soft. And then now when they go super loud, now it's out of nowhere super loud, and we have to bring the fader back, or we'll have clipping issues or distortion. So it's really important to set a compressor to your vocals to even out those dynamics. That way you're not having those issues, you're not having those clips or that distortion on the mic. Something I do always recommend is during sound check, always sound check with intention. Don't just go check 1, 2. Oh, cool. I have signal. We're good. No, don't do that. Yes, we want to check that we have signal, obviously, but we also want to check with intention. We want to make sure that everything is gain stage properly, everything is EQ'd properly, everything sounds good. So what I recommend is always have your singers or your instrumentalists play or sing the loudest they will for that set. So, your vocalist, just ask them to sing like a big chorus of a song at full volume. And then that way you could set your gain stage, you could set your compressors, you could set your EQ, and you don't have to worry about it later. And then when the whole band comes in, you just fine tuning faders, fine tuning EQ just to compensate for the rest of the mix. A thing that I do during sound check is when I help churches during sound check, or when I do sound check in my own church, I try to walk to at least 5 to 6 different spots in the room. So I'll either grab an iPad if my board is compatible with that, or if not, I'll just walk it and try to remember what I hear so I can come back, readjust, go back, walk again, and just listen. Try to make everything sound the same. Try to make, the room sound very consistent. I think that's very important to try to have that consistency. Like I was saying earlier, you'd be amazed how different the mix sounds in the front row versus the back row or the back corner. Walking the room is very important. All right, mistake number 2 that I've experienced and that I've seen you guys experience are live stream issues. The live stream isn't just a side project anymore. It's often the front door to your church. Ever since the pandemic a couple of years ago, churches live stream blew up, and a lot of churches still live stream. A lot of churches, I don't want to say depend on their live stream, but use their live stream to reach out to people outside the local community, to other places where, otherwise we wouldn't be able to reach. And a lot of people do come to church because they find the live stream on YouTube or wherever it may be hosted. I know in our church, we have a lot of people that have come because of our live stream. So the live stream is a great tool that we can use to spread the word, to share the gospel, and to have people get saved. With that said, live stream issues are very common that I've seen across many churches. A couple of examples would be the audio and the video is out of sync. The sound is distorted or very tinny. Sometimes you even have drops. The live stream cuts out, consider now, which can be very, very disrupting and very distracting. And the problem is that no one's really watching the mix until it's too late. Like a lot of churches just set it and kind of forget it. And that's not really how, the live stream should be handled. I saw a couple of Reddit threads full of volunteers saying, for example, our live stream sounds horrible, but we can't afford new gear. While that makes sense, gear is important to have. You could try to do what you can with the gear that you have. Here's what works. For example, I recommend separating your live stream mix. A lot of churches just send a copy of the front of house mix straight to the live stream. But that doesn't work because you're mixing for the room. You're not mixing for a live stream. You're not mixing for a set of headphones. You're not mixing for an iPhone or a TV. You have to have a separate live stream mix, whether it be an aux send from your board or whether it's a completely different board doing a completely different mix for your live stream. It's very important to separate it. Also, the live stream, you need to compress it differently. This is why you could send an aux send or a different board, but the compression in the room doesn't always work in the live stream. So you have to set your compression for the live stream to prioritize vocals and speech, because that's what we want to go out. When you're listening on an iPhone or a TV, you're not going to get that full spectrum of, your bass, your kick, and everything. You just have to compress it and EQ it, focus more on vocals and speech, because that's what's going to cut through on the small iPhone speakers or the TVs. A way you could achieve this is to buy a proper set of studio headphones that you could plug into your board, that you can monitor what's going out to the stream. And it's important that you get studio headphones, because studio headphones usually have really good drivers in them and really good isolation, so you could hear what actually is going out, not just a pair of, your JVC earbuds. Like, I recommend, investing in some studio headphones. They're not too expensive. You can get some Audio Technicas for around $150. That would help you a lot. That would help the sound quality going to the live stream a lot. Something a lot of people don't really think about is the network issue, the Wi-Fi of it all. I would recommend checking your upload speed on your provider. If it's too low, you might need to work with church administration to bring that up, because that's really important. If your upload speed is really slow, you're going to have low quality live stream, whether it be looking and sounding at a very low quality, or just dropping off overall. I would recommend at least 10 to 20 megabits upload speed minimum for a live stream. With that said, I also recommend doing a hard Ethernet connection to the computer that you're live streaming and not relying on Wi-Fi, especially if you allow your congregants to connect to your Wi-Fi. You want your computer to be directly on an Ethernet line. That way, there's less chance of dropouts. There's less chance of interference. That's very, very important. Do not run your live stream off of Wi-Fi. A quick little story time. In my old church, growing up, we set up a live stream, and this is when I was still learning how to do everything, and we always had an issue where the room sounded okay, the room sounded good, but the live stream was awful. We were sending, like I was saying earlier, what a lot of churches do, we were doing the same. We were sending the same front of house mix into the live stream straight to our Facebook at that time with no changes. And guess what? We got mostly drums, mostly guitar, little to no vocals, and it was just so loud and so distorted. And I did some research. I started learning more, and I discovered that honestly, just making a simple bus dedicated to the live stream and sending what you want to send to that bus with an EQ and a compression on the bus helps so much. It helps clear up the live stream. It helps it be less distracting. It might not sound perfect. It might not sound amazing, but it will sound better if you just do that. Just separate it into a bus. Decide how much of kick, snare, bass, whatever it may be, how much you're sending into that bus. Think of it as a monitor channel, as a floor monitor or an in-ear monitor. You want to do that. That way you're controlling what's going to the live stream. And like I said, put an EQ and a compressor on the overall buzz to try to glue everything together and try to make it sound balanced with no distortion on there. So that's something you have to keep monitoring. I know it might be difficult to monitor during service, but during your sound check or during your rehearsal, it's a good idea to just throw some headphones on, monitor it, and see how it's sounding like, so you could have better control over that. All right, mistake number 3 that I've seen you guys complain about on the forums is having untrained volunteers. Churches are full of great people who want to help, but then we throw them into a booth with no training, and we're setting them up for failure. I know that I've seen this happen, and I've experienced it to myself, where there is a need and we need someone to fill the need. And who is like the most tech savvy guy that we know? Oh, you're doing sound today. But, they're not trained. So we're setting them up for failure. I saw a couple of complaints online. I'll read a couple of them. One of them said, "I'm the only sound guy at my church and I've had 0 training." Another one says, "I volunteered once and now I'm stuck every Sunday." That's not what we want for our team. We want our team to be trained. We want our team to be properly equipped to provide the best that we can for the Lord, for, to prepare the church for the congregation that's coming in ready to worship. That's what it's all about, worshiping the Lord, sharing the gospel, and we have to do our best and, equip our team. We don't want to set them up for failure. Something that I've done in the past that helps is to create quick guides with pictures, like, take pictures of the gear, what you have, how it's all connected. Don't try to rely on memory, because not everyone's memory is the same, especially if your church has a rotation of sound guys. Like, you don't have like just one sound guy that does it every service. I would recommend, writing up some sort of document with pictures where you can see how everything should be connected for a good Sunday setup. And also, it's really important to set clear expectations with the team. What time to arrive to church, what to test. You want to show them what quote unquote success looks like. It's really important to have that time, even before the worship team arrives, to turn everything on, make sure you have signal on everything, make sure everything is ready to go. That way the worship team arrives, they're ready to sound check, and you're not wasting any more of their time or any of your time trying to figure out any issues that could have been figured out before they were there. It's a sacrifice. It is a commitment, but you have to, let your team know that this is the expectation for serving in this ministry. Commitment is a very huge part of it. There's one of the tech guys that I work with still at my job. He, I guess you could say I trained him. He started a couple of years ago. He knew a little bit of sound. He wasn't too confident in his skills, but we needed someone to run our Sunday night service, and I was assigned the task to train him. And I took him under my wing. I showed him what I knew, showed him what the expectations were, what our pastor wanted it to sound like, the issues that we have in that room. And I sat with him a couple of Sundays. I believe it was about a month and a half of me sitting with him and watching him mix, letting him be hands-on the board, and just jumping in for corrections or quick fixes that, can make it sound better. And now he, a couple years later, maybe I think it was like a year or two, maybe a year later, now ever since then, he's been running our main services, which we have over 2,000 people in attendance each service. And he runs the service and it sounds great. It sounds real good. There's no feedback issues. There's no muddiness issues. Everything is super clear to the expectations that our pastor and our team has wanted it to be. It sounds great. Like, he's doing a great job. Just spending some time with someone and mentoring them, could grow them, could help them grow their gifts. And now they could be the team lead, for the tech team. Confidence comes from preparation. I've had mentors before that would tell me to not use the phrase practice makes perfect, because that's not true. Practice makes permanent. However you practice, that's how it's going to stick. So the preparation is really important. The pouring into new volunteers and new people that want to serve is really important. Also, remember that volunteers are also ministers. You have to honor your team, honor their time, not just burn them out. That's really important. Mistake number 4 that I've seen, I don't know if it's really a mistake, but I guess problem number 4 that I've seen is having outdated or problematic gear. So this is very controversial. While outdated gear isn't necessarily bad, outdated gear is bad if it's unreliable or incompatible with modern day gear that your team might be using. Some common frustrations of that is having wireless mics that drop out, crackling cables, dead channels on mixers or on patch bass. Those are things that come with having older equipment with age. I've experienced that many times, and usually you can repair them with analog patch bass. You could, either you can, or you could hire someone who knows how to solder cables to just, do a quick refresh and a resolder and a clean of your patch bay to try to bring up those channels. If you are having issues with the actual board itself, depending on the age or the condition, it might not be worth to repair. So those are the things you would have to look into. But buying gear isn't always a solution. You don't need to spend 50,000, 70, or $100,000 to fix this. What I recommend is to start with a gear audit. What's actually needed, what's fading consistently. Is there something that we can repair, or is there something that we can send out for repair, or if it's something that we just straight up need to replace. I see a lot of churches that would, I understand budget is an issue, might have lower budgets, but I always think that it's important to invest in quality where it matters, such as microphones, DI boxes, wireless systems. You have to spend the money once and not spend it multiple times by buying cheaper stuff, by buying stuff that doesn't work, that is incompatible. I am a true believer of saving up to buy the better equipment. That way you don't have to buy it again in a couple of years, because that you bought good equipment that's going to last you for a long time. Another thing that you could do is to keep backups of some of your gear. So have several XLR cables in the back somewhere just as backups. Don't only have the amount of XLR cables you need, because one day an XLR cable will fail 5 minutes before service, and now you don't have your vocalist or your guitarist or your keyboard player on because you don't have an extra cable. That's something really important. Always keep extra cables, extra backups, extra DI boxes on hand somewhere. Another thing that's super important is to label everything. Label everything. Label the male end, the female end of your XLR cables, both ends of your instrument cables. Label everything so that you know where everything is. That way, when you have an issue and you do a troubleshoot, it will be a lot easier to find that issue because everything is labeled. You have no idea how many churches I've worked with that their stuff isn't labeled. So now I have to go in and trace everything, see where everything is at, how everything is connected to try to find the issue. And that just takes so much time. If something happens during your sound check or during your service, you don't have that time to try to figure out your chain because you don't remember how it's plugged in or because someone else plugged it in for you. Everything has to be labeled. I recommend labeling everything, labeling your DI boxes, your cables, your channels. Everything should be labeled to where it makes sense for just anyone to go in there, or anyone of your team to go in there and mix and fix issues. If your volunteers or your team can't trace a signal from mic to speaker, your system is either too complex or underdocumented. And I can tell you from experience, it's probably underdocumented. Mistake number 5 that I've seen is poor communication within the team, within support teams. You could have the best gear and still crash and burn if the team's not on the same page. It's really important that, everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows what the vision of the church is, knows what the expectations of the church is, and, what the expectations is of what the pastor or your leader wants to sound like. It happens all the time where someone walks in with a new video 5 or even 2 minutes before service starts. The worship leader swaps songs mid-set with no heads up to your lyrics guy, or a mic is handed off to someone without communicating to front of house to see if it's okay to hand off or if it's even on or working. These are the kind of miscommunications that cause these issues. Everybody has to be on the same page, whether it be quick text message or on comms, but we have to be on the same page. There's a couple of different ways that you could accomplish this. I think if your church isn't already using Planning Center, I think Planning Center is a great tool to keep everyone on task, to keep everyone on the same page. We use Planning Center at my church and it's great. Our worship leader uploads the songs. We have what the flow of service should be every time. And if there's any change, any song change or any flow service, we usually have one of our volunteers, one of our tech team members to update that Planning Center. That way it updates across everyone on campus. We have the Planning Center live everywhere, or people can watch it on their phones, put it on a phone stand, but it will update live. And that way everyone is in sync and everyone knows what's going on. It's really important to have some sort of service flow during your service, and Planning Center is a great tool for that. Another thing that we do and that I recommend doing is having a tech team huddle and prayer before service, maybe 15 minutes before service. Just huddle with the tech team, either with your tech director or someone who has been assigned to be the tech lead. Have a rundown of what the service is going to look like. For example, countdown ends, worship leader introduces service, 3 songs on top. We have announcements. Pastor so-and-so is coming out for announcements. Then we have offering pickup. Then we have 1 or 2 songs after that. And then pastor, senior pastor, lead pastor comes out and does the message, preaches for about 45 minutes to an hour, whatever it may be in your church. And then worship team comes back out on cue, on pastor's cue, or when he starts praying, whatever the cue may be for your church, and does 1 or 2 more songs to close out the service. And these are the kind of things that you need to have a rundown before service, just what. So everybody's on the same page. What's going to happen if you have multiple services during the day, back to back? Try to find a spot to huddle for at least 5 minutes to just run down what the next service is going to look like in case there's been a change that has been communicated. And also, I think it's really important to just pray. Take a couple of minutes with your team, pray, so that everyone's in the same spirit, everyone's in the same mindset, ready and prepared, not to just serve, but to also worship Him. That's what it's all about. All right, let's recap the 5 common church tech mistakes. Number 1, we had poor audio quality. Number 2 was live stream issues. Number 3 was untrained volunteers. Number 4 was outdated gear. And number 5 was bad communication. If any of those hit close to home, it's okay. You're not failing, you're learning. The good news is that every one of these issues has a solution, and this podcast is here to help you find them. I have a challenge for you guys for this week. Pick one of these 5 areas, and this Sunday or your next service, take 1 step to improve it. Maybe it's labeling your cables, which label everything. Label everything. Maybe it's testing your live stream 30 to 15 minutes before your service starts. Or maybe it's just encouraging or fellowshipping with your team. Well, we've reached the end of the episode. Thanks for hanging out with me on this first episode of Church Tech Unmuted. If you found this valuable, would you do me a quick favor? Would you follow the podcast, maybe leave a review, share it with your worship team or your tech director? And if your church could use help tuning your sound, upgrading live streams, or training your tech volunteers, visit faithtechpros.com. We're here to serve you, to serve your church, to serve the Lord. Until next time, keep your channels clean, your game staged, and your team encouraged.